cool. If you're into making 800 wheel horsepower with an LS on somewhat of a budget, it pretty much comes down to supercharger or turbocharger. But which one is better? Recently you guys saw us swap this HELLCAT supercharger onto this LY6 6-liter LS engine. This was made possible by our friends over at Trinity Performance and Design. They designed an adapter kit to bolt the HELLCAT supercharger to any LS of your choice. And the last time that you saw this, we did a comparison between the supercharger and turbocharger on the dyno. This engine has been around the block quite a few times. This LY6 actually used to be in my Fairmont station wagon with a set of twin 7875 turbos. And what we found in that comparison is that the turbochargers made significantly more horsepower than the HELLCAT supercharger, but not by a terrible amount. Today we're going to explore that same comparison, except we're going to be at a racetrack. Now, a supercharger like this should make a lot more low-end torque. Positive displacement superchargers like this one right here are known for their boost curve being available at pretty much any RPM. They basically make a boost curve where the boost comes up and then it just holds through the entire RPM range. Turbos, on the other hand, take a little bit of time to respond. Normally, when you are staging the car, you're going to have a lower amount of boost available than when, say, you're down track. But does that translate to an actual real-world difference in elapsed time? Well, let's go to the track and find out. We actually ran this car at 6 summer. Our day 0 results are what you just saw, and we had a few problems that we had to sort through throughout the week.
The Chevelle on the left-hand side is Mark Krantz. Camaro pulling a little wheel on the right-hand side is Andrew Nelson, 85 model Camaro. Andrew is going to get down the racetrack first, 10:16 at 1:33 for him.
We started to see more encouraging results on day 1, but as you're about to see, we had a few ignition-related issues in day 2 through 4, which we'll get to in a second. Day 4 was by far the worst performance of the week. The car was missing the whole way down the track, and we only managed a 12:26. Alright, so yesterday you probably saw that this thing didn't really perform the best, and this couple here just drove 40 minutes to give us an LS coil here. So that has fixed our problem, and hopefully we can get this thing into the 9s today.
That brings up Bill Schwartz next left-hand side. He's running in the heavy metal category. He will line up with the third-gen Camaro on the right-hand side of Andrew Nelson. Schwartz has been in the 840s, 850 range. He goes 860 here at 162. On the opposite side of the racetrack, 1033, 129.
Now, I will say that I was a little bit disappointed with the results from this car from 6 summer. I was really hoping that the car would have gotten into the 9s, but it just wasn't going to give it to us unless we gave it a little bit more boost. And frankly, we had not yet reached the amount of boost that we had run with the turbo setup on this same exact engine, and therefore, it was time to put the party pulley back on this thing and take it back to the drag strip to have ourselves a true A/B comparison. Nice! That sounded cool. On that first pass, we ran 18.5 pounds of boost, and we ran it with the hood. Now, my dad fabricated this bell mouth entry going into the supercharger to give the suction side of the supercharger as much of a chance as he could. For the second pass, we decided to take off the hood so that the supercharger could get fresh air to see if it made a difference. Very cool. That's all fine and good, but how did the turbo setup perform at a similar boost level? Well, we just so happen to have some data from that, so let's show it to you.
This is a fresh car that he just put together. Very nicely done. Super Sano. I believe it's a 6.0 or a 6.2 liter twin turbo in the Fairmont.
9081, 151.60, so very clean leave for Calvin Nelson.
Now, a lot of you probably throughout the video have said, well, this thing probably weighs more than your station wagon did. And what about the aerodynamics? Well, I think it's kind of a wash. The weights of the cars are within 100 pounds of one another, and by the time you factor in how much more aerodynamic this thing is than my station wagon, and then factor in that the station wagon has a smaller frontal area, this one probably has a larger one, I bet it comes out to a wash. And I feel that it's a fair comparison. And something that you hear turbo guys talk about a lot is the top end charge. And I think this is where the turbochargers shine. If we compare the time slips to one another, you can see that the 60 foots are pretty similar, but you can really see where the turbocharger starts to run away with it on the top end. And that's the power of a torque converter right there. Having the right torque converter for your combination that gets the engine into the RPM range where it is making peak power as efficiently as possible makes all the difference. And you can see, even though the supercharger has more power at a lower RPM, it doesn't really matter a whole lot because the engine really isn't there for very long on the drag strip. Now, as far as a street car, if you like that grunt, you know, that punchy down low feeling, you will never be able to get better than a supercharger. But once you get up into the RPM range and the blower starts to heat soak a little bit, well, that's where the turbochargers start to run away with the race. But if you don't agree, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Now, I will freely admit, I thought we had reached a plateau with this supercharger. Sure, there's lots of upgrades that are available for the supercharger itself, but they're kind of costly. These superchargers are kind of hard to find information on. I've searched lots of HELLCAT forums and pretty much anywhere that I can find on the internet to figure out what a maximum safe blower speed is on these, and I couldn't really find any good information. If you look at the parts suppliers for these superchargers that offer upgraded supercharger bearings for them, they say that a maximum safe blower speed is 16 to 17,000 RPM. And we're already exceeding that. They say to rev it higher than that, you need to get some of their fancy aftermarket ceramic bearings, which cost $2,600. We could also try to port the blower, try to get the air to move more freely into the supercharger, because oftentimes the suction side of the supercharger is where the restriction is at. But as far as the capabilities of the supercharger on a reasonable budget, I thought we were at the limit. That is, until I saw this. Now, what you're seeing here is a very significant supercharger failure. And the guys over at Trinity Performance and Design have been attempting to find the limits of a stock blower. And they got into contact with some of the HELLCAT guys who said that spinning these things to around 24,000 RPM at the pulley is where the maximum safe limit is. And we've only been spinning at 19,000. And we thought that that was already a sketchy place to be. Now, in order to determine how fast you are spinning the supercharger, it's a pretty simple math equation. We have a 9.17 lower pulley with a 3.19 upper pulley. And if you take these two numbers and divide them by one another, that gives you what is called your pulley ratio. From there, you take the maximum engine RPM and multiply it by the pulley ratio, and that will give you the blower speed at the pulley. Now, you have to be careful because These superchargers have two rotors that spin at two different RPMs, and the drive for the supercharger drives the big supercharger rotor, and the other one gets spun at a higher speed. And this ratio between these two rotors is 5 and 3. For every 3 rotations of the big rotor, you get 5 rotations of the small rotor. So using our maximum engine RPM multiplied by our pulley ratio, that gives us around 19,250 RPM at the blower pulley, and then taking our ratio from the big rotor to the small rotor is spinning at around 32,000 RPM. The Trinity Performance and Design guys had a failure on the small rotor, which was spinning in excess of 40,000 RPM when they had their failure. Obviously, we're going to try to avoid that, but I think we could bump up the RPM a little bit on this pulley and maybe get a little more airflow out of the supercharger. And there's some other mods that we could do to the engine to possibly produce more horsepower with the same blower speed. This thing could definitely use a larger primary diameter on the headers. They are only 1 7/8" headers. We also have a blower cam that we could drop into this thing to see how that performs. Now, our long-term goal is to get this project into the 8. And we could also do quite a bit of lightening of the car. We have a tubular front suspension kit and some lightweight shocks that we could put in onto this thing. But my point is, we have a lot of room to grow with this combination. And if you guys remember, my original pitch with this supercharger is you get a much larger supercharger than an LSA for a lower cost. So in future videos, you're gonna see us continue to develop this supercharger by optimizing the combo, and maybe someday we will prove that this is the superior supercharger. So with that, I'm gonna end this video off here. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you guys think of this combination. Are you impressed? Is there something that you think that we should do in order to improve our results? And a great way to support the channel is to go and buy a t-shirt. Links are in the description. See you guys in the next one.